Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome into the box seats here on latenightsportsradio.com with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan. Hooking you back after last week, talking some NFL. If you didn't get a chance to catch that one, check it out again. Ignore the Hall of Fame game that we were talking about. But, Alex, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. Probably a good thing we didn't give out a play for that Hall of Fame game exactly. Nothing definite in stone. Otherwise, I mean, if you played it, obviously you got your money back. But that was one of the weirder things that happen in sports, I would say, this year. Definitely as far as the NFL goes. I mean, there's always a debacle of some sort in the NFL. But who would imagine that 2 hours before a kickoff, there'd be a paint issue on the field that would cancel the entire game, you know?
Well, it's something that I've never heard of being done. It's always something where it's like, that was something where you thought, like, okay, there's always a possibility that this could happen. Well, maybe not that specific, but it's like with South Park, when they're always talking about how they were 5 minutes from having to miss an episode because they were 5 minutes from missing their deadline with County Central. I think it's only happened once where they actually missed their deadline, and that week everybody freaked out. Everybody's like, what happened here? How did they miss their deadline? And that's kind of what the NFL is, or any sport really, where there's some fluke thing that happens. Fortunately, it's a game that doesn't matter. The surprising thing to me, though, is that they're not trying to force these teams to play this.
Well, and I'm reading now that the groups of fans that are getting together to possibly file a class action lawsuit to get back the money from their travel and so forth against not only the Hall of Fame but the NFL themselves. And they stressed throughout for those that watch the ESPN, I guess, 2 hour basically pregame show, that's what it turned into, a 3 hour, pregame. They talked about how, the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is a separate entity from the National Football League. They made that clear about 10 times. And I think they said that and made that specific because they knew there would be some lawsuits coming about from this, be it from, a many, number of different angles and areas. So this isn't over yet by any means. I mean, obviously, the teams will only have 4 preseason games, and I don't think they're worried so much, but the fans that spent their money and their time to get down there, they need to be compensated properly, and they need to make sure this never, ever happens again because, like I said, they're already trying to cut preseason down as is. This puts the Hall of Fame game in a spot to, possibly be eliminated, which would really hurt the Hall of Fame as a building, but also hurt the city of Canton, Ohio, tremendously. This is a very big weekend for them every year, and to have that revenue possibly lost forever would be a tragedy for that area.
What if they just made, I know a lot of people wouldn't like it, but nobody likes the London game either. What if we just made this the Hall of Fame game week 1 of the NFL season?
I don't think that would work. I mean, when you start talking about an NFL regular season game, the security measures, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, and you have to have, a facility that's in the NFL guidelines of having a franchise and having a game, is that with the regular season game, the attendance has to be a certain number. There's, you got the television proximities and so forth. So I don't think they would ever go and do that. I mean, we've seen circumstances in other sports. For example, this past year, the 4th of July, we saw, it was the Braves and Marlins play in Fort Bragg. They built that stadium from scratch to have a game for the troops in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Baseball's a little different, though, however, where the NFL, you're talking about, a much larger production for a regular season game. I don't think they would ever possibly do that. I think they would just keep this a preseason game. My thing would be make it the 3rd preseason game. Make it one of the games that actually count. However, you still would have some backlash from teams saying, all right, well, this is, in the middle of our, travel regimen, and it breaks up the middle of our, granted, you do have a lot of camps that break after the 3rd weekend, but If you're going to keep it around, I say make it one of the more important preseason games. Don't have it be a game where the starters aren't even going to play anyway. You know what I mean? All these people drove from Green Bay to Ohio, and they're not going to see Aaron Rodgers even, take the field other than, maybe, flip the coin for the kickoff. Same thing with Andrew Luck. None of the stars play in these games anymore because of how their schedules are. So if you're going to have this game and have it count and have some purpose, make it, have it be two teams close by, have it be Cincinnati, Cleveland, play their third preseason game against one another, or the Bears and Cleveland always play each other in the preseason every year. To have some regional teams where the game will actually matter more in the synopsis of a preseason than just be the first game, to lead off the entire year.
Okay. On that note, let's get into college football. Okay, we got some over-unders out there right now. The one that killed me last year was Kansas at an over-under 1.5 wins.
Yeah.
They did not cover that. They're back at 1.5 wins again this year, teasing me again. I mean, they can't. They open up with Rhode Island, which I didn't even know Rhode Island had a football team. And then they have University of Ohio University at home, and they're usually fairly decent. They're going to go on to Memphis. They're going to lose that one. Then, you got Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, OSU, Oklahoma, West Virginia. They get Iowa State at home. I got to think there's 2 wins on that schedule for them. I cannot think that you can win one win back-to-back seasons when your over-under is 1.5. There's no way. Am I buying into fool's gold here if I go with Kansas to get the over here?
A buddy of mine.
You told me not to do this last year.
I did. A buddy of mine a long time ago, he was an electrician. And he was an older gentleman. He always says, you always check for certain points, especially when you're working with things like sockets, switches, and that matter. He says you always check for certain points to make sure you don't get electrocuted. And he says in the event of where you do get shocked, he says you drop everything and you step back and make sure everything's turned off, and you try to make sure not to do the exact same thing a second time to get shocked. So with that being said, looking at this Kansas Jayhawks schedule, Rhode Island, not one of the best 1AA programs around. They're pretty bad. If I'm not mistaken, I think they only won maybe 3 or 4 games last year. That's a much better chance of Kansas winning this year compared to their opening game, which they lost to North Dakota State, which is one of the best, FCS 1AA programs in the country. I think they get the win against Rhode Island. Ohio's going to be tough. They're not as good as years past, but they are a fairly good program. That would be the swing game. I don't see them winning after September 10th. I think they're more than likely going to have they're going to get crushed again within the Big 12 schedule. I don't see them winning a game after week 2. So with that being said, you're better off possibly looking and see if they could at least cover the spread against Ohio, and that might be the only chance where you want to take a chance of betting with the Kansas Jayhawks this year. But I would not try to go over 1.5 wins again this season, just like I wouldn't have done it last year.
Okay, all right, that's fair. All right, so that caught my eye, which was it was more comically caught my eye. What caught your eye as far as win totals this year? Actually, one off the bat, looking at North Carolina, an 8.5, that seems a little low. But what caught your eye in particular?
The biggest one that caught my eye this year was University of Illinois. There was a lot of rumblings going on with Illinois when they finally went and got a big name coach, well, as big of a name as they could find, and Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith, who had been with the Bears for a long time, and we know his history there, and of course, unceremoniously bounced from Tampa Bay. Now finds himself in the college ranks with Illinois. And that's one of the bigger names that, have been down there in some time. Program that has just never quite really done anything tremendous over the years. They had that one kind of offshoot year back in 2007. They actually made a Rose Bowl appearance. And then you got to go back to around, 2000, 2001 era, when they had some decent squads. But looking at their schedule this year and what they bring back, they don't bring back a lot, especially on defense. Four guys coming back on defense, 7 guys on offense, and yes, they have the quarterback back, but they have Wes Lunt, who's a guy who has shown throughout his college career that he cannot stay healthy. So not really a guy that's super dependable. Jeff George Jr. is another quarterback that is within this program that they said he had a decent spring and had a good showing in the spring game. They say there's a possibility he's a freshman, he a redshirt freshman, he could start potentially, down the line for this team. Obviously, we know Lovie Smith is more of a defensive-minded coach, and that's going to be tough. Like I said, having 4 guys coming back on defense. The win total 4.5 here. I only see this team possibly maybe getting 1 or 2 wins. Looking at the schedule, I think they get their win against Murray State at the beginning of the year. Yeah. But they'll struggle against North. I don't see them having any close of a chance in North Carolina. Western Michigan's a really good program. I think that's a good squad led there by P.J. Fleck. I think Western Michigan has a chance to go into Champaign and pull out a win there. And you look into their Big Ten schedule at Nebraska, that's going to be a tough spot. Purdue at home, they'll be favored, but Purdue's slowly but surely getting a little bit better. That won't be a easy game for them. At Rutgers, that might be a game that they get their second win. Rutgers still has a way to go, but you look at the rest of down the slate. At Michigan, Minnesota's a good program. Michigan State's strong. At Wisconsin, Iowa, and then at Northwestern. And if I'm not mistaken, that Northwestern game once again will be at Soldier Field at the end of the year. I don't see them getting any wins in those on that slate the last 6 games. So this is a team I think 4.5. I think you get some really decent value with. I see 1 for sure win, possibly 2. Maybe, just maybe 3 wins if they could possibly beat Purdue and Rutgers. But I don't see any more than that. So I like them under 4.5 wins.
One that caught just as living in Nebraska, the 8.5 for a team that won 6 games last year. Not a good team. This is not a good team. They were under 500. Yeah, they have a returning quarterback, but I'm kind of wondering if this is a skewed number, like to kind of tempt Husker fans to be like, oh, are we missing something? And in that situation, with your advice, you don't touch teams where it's like, do I have to ask more questions, and should I be asking more questions about this team?
Right.
And questions I have, okay, you get Fresno State and Wyoming off the bat. Well, Fresno, not very good. They're not going to be very good. That should be a win. Now, Wyoming, not a good team. However, Craig Bull was fired, kicked out of town. There's a little motivation. He's going to have some motivation for that game as coach of Wyoming. Whether that matters or not, probably not. But I don't know. McNeese State almost upset the Huskers in Memorial Stadium. Memorial Stadium is not what it used to be as far as an intimidating place to play for opposing teams. I hate to go game by game, but then you get Oregon. That's not a slam dunk. No. And then your road games this year: Northwestern, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Iowa. With the way they were last year, how bad they were at closing out games, those problems, better talent can mask those problems for the most part. Mm-hmm. But this is pretty much, other than a few freshmen, you got pretty much the same roster for the most part. I don't think that's going to help. I don't see 8.5 wins. I think this is a 7-win team at best, maybe an 8-win team. But that's it. I can't see them getting 9. I think 8.5 is pretty high. I would have set it at. I'll be right at 8, in my opinion.
It's interesting because we remember how many close games Nebraska lost last year. Yeah, games that they could have easily won. And obviously you look at some a fluky spot, the BYU Hail Mary, the Miami game, in overtime. Even like I said, the losses to Illinois and Northwestern, all games that they could have easily won. And so I think that kind of factors into this line a little bit of, it obviously, like I said, they have a much tougher non-conference schedule this year, which that's got to be a sign of worry. Like you said, McNeese State almost went in and handled them at home. And it's funny you mentioned about how Memorial Stadium not as strong as it's been over the years. I read an article today. I actually just kind of scanned over it, but they said that there's a possibility of the long-running sellout streak that's been going on since, I think, 1962.
Yeah, it was the game after Kennedy was shot, so November of 63.
So 63. So they're saying that this streak could possibly come to an end, and I think they're saying that they're having trouble selling tickets for that. It's the Wyoming game, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's not a good sign. Like I said, you're talking about a program that's been so, even when they have their down years, they're still a strong program overall. But when you start hearing little rumblings like that, and like I said, some of the tough losses they've had over the years, and the personnel changes and so forth, so it makes you kind of wonder, will this team, be as mentally strong as they have been in years past? Can they need to have an entire year of bounce back after, having some of those really tough losses? Can they find a way to close out games? And until we see that proven, that's a team I couldn't even try and touch on a over or under total. But there's definitely a team I'll be watching for. If they get off the gate hot, if they could, find a way to beat Oregon at home, maybe get a win at Northwestern, start the year off 4-0 going into coming back home against Illinois. So they have a legitimate chance to be 5-0, even 6-0, heading into the meat of their conference play. So yeah, it's possible, but like I said, they run into some tough teams late. I wouldn't look to lay the over here, but that's definitely a team that I have circled to look out for as far as going against the spread on a week-to-week basis.
Is there any other team right now that, with looking at your numbers and then you saw what Vegas had, where you're like, holy crap? What was the one that you saw that you were giddy about?
Well, it's an interesting one. There's one where like we mentioned before, I'm not a big over-unders guy, but looking at a team that I saw early in the year when I get my Phil Steele book in June, and look through and I always look for returning starters, schedule spots, and different things to note. And I'm always looking at a team, obviously towards the spread. But a team that really seems to be an interesting team, a team I think that will cover a lot of games but won't win a heck of a whole lot, is Wyoming. The Cowboys, you look at this team, they've got 9 starters coming back on offense, 8 on defense, one of their special team guys coming back. So 18 returning starters, that's usually a good thing to have more often than not. However, we are talking about a team that went 2-10 last year. So, bringing people back, people say, oh, yeah, well, more and more experience. Yeah, but if they aren't good, they just aren't good. It doesn't matter how many years they stay there. So with that being said, you look at their schedule. They start off hosting Northern Illinois, which is a team that I follow closely, and I look at this game, and Northern Illinois is a 10-point favorite. Northern Illinois is a team that has a really tough time playing in high altitude. Wyoming, they have one of the highest altitude stadiums in the country. So, game that they could hang around and probably cover a 10-point spread, more than likely won't win the ball game outright. We just mentioned them going into Nebraska. They're going to be heavy underdogs in that spot. And then, their 1AA opponent that comes in, UC Davis. And they say, okay, well, 1AA team, they're going to be a heavy favorite, more likely going to win this game. UC Davis runs a triple option that a lot of teams have had trouble preparing for. They're a team that can score a lot of points. For those who follow 1AA football, that know what I'm talking about. They're one of those teams that are always in the top 25 of the 1AA. They've played some playoff games. That's not going to be a complete cakewalk for them. Granted, once again, they'll have the altitude on their side. Then they go on the road at Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan, another terrible squad, but now they're leaving to go on the road. They won't have the altitude to help them out. Then they get into the bulk of their Mountain West play. Colorado State, Air Force, Nevada. Of course, we know about Boise State, San Diego State. Those are some good teams that they have to play. They're a team I think will cover a lot of numbers. I think they're going to get a lot of value if they struggle early in winning games. But they're a team that I definitely think that could easily maybe only win one game the whole year, if that. No more than two. So in looking at their number, the South Point number that opened up was 3.5. I think there's a little bit of value there going under that number, where I don't see where 3-4 wins come out of this team in this lineup. So that's something that really got me excited on both ends of, wow, I could play this under. But this is definitely a team that I'll be looking forward to possibly taking big points with later, because I think they'll be able to keep games close, especially at home, having the altitude. If they can keep themselves focused in games in the second half, close the distance on a few teams, we could see them cover the number in a lot of these games that they won't have a chance to win outright.
One thing I do in college football is I rarely take a number. This is not advice, but this is just my thing. Is with college football, I wait till 5 minutes before the game, or just do live betting, because after during in years past, you can always count on some idiot on Friday night. I know it happens in the NFL, but it happens far more in college, where somebody gets suspended for a half, or somebody gets suspended for the game for violating team rules. It usually happens on a Thursday or Friday, or the coach announces that a player is being punished, but you don't know what the punishment is, right? Even during the game. And that's my thing with Alabama. They got USC game 1, but I don't feel like I feel like with college football, I feel more comfortable betting in game or right before the game starts, so I know who's playing, who's not, and it's more so not with the injuries. It's more so with the who's getting suspended, who's not, who's in trouble, who's not. That's why I'm not even going to lay down a dime on any week 1 games until at the most 15 hours before kickoff, and maybe not even then. So is there any, right now, are you even looking at laying down anything as far as point spreads go for week 1, or are you kind of staying away? And when's the time that you're going to start actually paying attention to point spreads? Or are you paying attention and then waiting until the right time?
Yeah, I paid attention to the point spreads. Like I said, these numbers have been up for a while now. This is the first year I can remember virtually every major book, Vegas and offshore, having all of week 1 up this early. So I paid attention to the numbers for a while, but I understand what you're saying. And as far as week 1 goes, I feel the exact same way. I'm going to wait on a lot of these games. I don't see myself putting a wager on any of these contests until maybe 2-3 weeks from now. And with that being said, as years pass and these numbers come out earlier and earlier, because of the volatility for suspensions and injuries, and you got guys who are now being declared officially eligible to play or ineligible to play because of summer classes. There's a lot of different things that go on with college programs where I don't bet as many games week 1 as I do weeks 2, 3, 4 in the rest of the season. If anything, I play more totals, which don't come out usually until about maybe 2 weeks before kickoff. So I'm guessing around, with the first game being August 26th and over in Australia. I think the first totals we'll see pop up will probably be around next weekend. So I'd say, August, 19th, 20th. That's when we'll start seeing totals pop up everywhere. So I'm more of a totals player in week one as opposed to spreads, because a lot of these numbers have been hit hard by guys who are number players and jumped on them early. And like you said, it's just too risky, having guys suspended and so forth. And that's not my full move as far as the rest of the season goes. I like to get on games early. College football numbers move quickly, and I like to, if I don't jump on a game right away on a Monday or Tuesday, then I want to wait and get some information no later than Thursday. I want to have my, a perfect weekend. I like to have all of my Saturday games wagered on by no later than Friday afternoon, because I want to get the best of that number. I want to get there before the squares start filing into the books and logging on and hitting those numbers early Saturday morning. So rarely will I have, unless it's a live wager or a first or second half play, those are really the only things I'm doing on a Friday or Saturday in getting ready for a card. And I don't do as much live wagering in college like I do in pro. So most of my full game bets for college football are between Tuesday and Thursday, when I've got some information and want to jump on a number early.
All right. Well, let's get on to our best bets of the week. I'll go first with my good bet. This isn't, anything, set in stone. I'm not 100% confident in this. This is why it's going to be good. But South Carolina, 5 wins, seems a tad high. I think the way I see them as, 3-4 win team. Yes, they have Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Missouri, a bad Missouri team on their schedule. The SEC East. I still just do not like this team, and I really do not like their coach, Will Muschamp. I think he is a bad coach, and they don't really have a they don't really have a quarterback. They don't have an offense, and his focus is on defense. I don't see this team winning more than 5 games. I'm going to say 3-4 win team. They'll get their wins in the SEC East, but not much else. So, Alex, what's your good bet for the week?
Well, my good bet, we're going to go to quickly to pro football, and it was something we talked about last week. This was my best bet for last week, and it's a game that's coming up on Saturday. The line has moved, so that's why it's now my good bet instead of last week's best bet. It was last week's best bet because it was at a good number. Now the number's moved. It's going to move a little bit more. L.A. Rams, now a 4-point favorite, probably going to move closer to 5, maybe even 5.5 by kickoff. It's going to get steamed up. But there's still some value getting it laying 4 against the Dallas Cowboys. Like I said, the Rams, great spot. They're going to be fired up to play. National TV crowd back in the Coliseum. Dallas having some injury issues, suspension issues. They're going through some things right now, and I think the Rams are just a little bit more solid and ready to play a full 60-minute contest more than the Dallas Cowboys right now. So my good bet for this week, get it now while there's still some value. Lay the 4 points with the LA Rams.
Better bet. I'm chomping at the bit with this Kansas one, but I can't give it out as a better bet. But I'm going to say Nebraska, under 8.5. I think, at the most they'll be an 8-win team. That Iowa one at the end of the year, I think it'll come down to the Iowa game. And that's always a weird one for the Huskers, and Iowa for that matter. It's always a bad game. It's a horrible game to watch. Not very palatable to watch. I'm going to say Nebraska with the under. That's my better bet. What is your better bet?
My better bet, I talked about it, the Wyoming Cowboys. And this will be twofold. Like I said, I like them going under 3.5 wins. And the twofold part of that is for for those, the novice players, the weekend players who, to kind of get a feel for, a team or want to, try to branch out and really focus on a few select teams every year, I say Wyoming is a team to put in your chart to circle and watch for every week. A good team to follow some of the beat writers, being in the Mountain West area, so they've got a lot of their newspaper and AD people are in the SID people you can find on Twitter, and they'll have a lot more information available through their school and through their websites than they will, say, some of the bigger programs. So playing them under 3.5 wins, I think they're going to struggle to win games outright, but they're going to be competitive in a lot of these games, and I think we could see them cover a lot of big spreads, especially with some of those games that are at home throughout the year. So Wyoming under 3.5 wins, but definitely keep them on the radar as far as a team to bet on as a big dog against the spread throughout the year.
My best bet is Washington. They're slated at a total of winning 9 games, over under 9. I would prefer a half there, so it would be easier. But I think, this team has high expectations. This is a team people are talking about potentially winning the Pac-12 North.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's, a year early. The Pac-12 North, has, Stanford, you got Oregon, you got a psycho with Mike Leach. Those are 3 games right there that are not the easiest to get around. And Washington State, that's a solid team. Stanford's solid. Oregon is, they're all right. Cal's going to be bad. That's going to be an easy win. Oregon State's going to be bad. That'll be an easy win. But as far as Washington goes, I think they're still that 1 year away. I think Chris Peterson needs 1 more year of recruiting, 1 more year of the guys getting in there to mature a little bit. That's when they're going to take their steps. So I'm going to say they're not going to be able to handle the expectations this year, and I say they fall short of 9 wins. Do you have anything to add on to that, or agree or disagree?
For the most part, I would agree with that. The Pac-12 is such a strong conference over the last couple of years, and we've seen some crazy games, and crazy finishes go down within that conference that, it's hard to really get a grasp on how many games can some of these schools actually win. So, anything can really happen. That's such a hard conference to read. So I wouldn't agree or disagree with that. I'd have to read more into it, but I could see where Washington, they're a team that they have failed to reach expectations more times than not. I would say in years where they've been slated to be a really good team. So I would just kind of roll with you and roll with more of tradition in that spot. And if I had to book them either way, I would look at them under the total.
And what is your best bet for this week?
My best bet is kind of what I let off with, talking about college football. University of Illinois, they're making some changes in the right direction. They bring in a big name, a former NFL guy, Lovie Smith, a guy who's familiar with the state of Illinois. But I just don't think they have the talent this year to really do anything major at all. They've got a really tough slate of action, not just within their Big Ten schedule, but their non-conference schedule is the non-conference schedule is not easy at all. Outside of Murray State, I don't really see where exactly a second win comes from here. So getting some tremendous value, in my opinion, at 4.5 wins, I'm definitely going to go under the 4.5 with the Fighting Illini.
Alrighty. Well, good stuff tonight. Before we get out of here, is there? Do you want to tell everybody where we can find you on Twitter, the internets, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at AXSmithSports. Talking more and more about football. Be posting up some key things that I follow on Twitter. I have some Twitter lists for people to follow as far as beat writers and certain things to be looking for during the season. Week 1 of preseason is kicking off this week. I got 2 plays up already. You can grab those right now at sportsmemo.com, or you can sign up for a full season package right now at axsmithsports.com. So either one of those options available for you right now. So definitely get on board now, because it's only going to get busier and crazier now. So best time to settle things up now. Get on board now and get some winners right off the bat. Bob, what do you got going on this week for your show?
I do not have a plan just yet for my show, but I will be getting that figured out here in the next couple of days. Probably gonna do mostly a more so than not a football show. So we'll get that all just one.